we are going to be solving quadratic equations by completing the square. This may be one of the more difficult lessons of the year because there are so many moving parts. However, we're going to start off with a quadratic equation. A quadratic equation is just any equation that can be written in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0, or a, b, and c are just constants. What we're going to do in completing this square is we are going to move that into, somehow through the magic of math, the left-hand side being a binomial factored squared is equal to a constant. Now, we're going to do this, and this step is called the completing the square. Now, once I bring you back to step 1, we can just simply, to move on to step 2, and to solve, we can take the square root of both sides, like we did in the previous lesson. So step 1 to step 2 we've done in the previous lesson. Same to go to step 2 to 3. So for an example, I've laid it out. If I have the equation x squared plus 6x plus 1 is equal to 0, I'm going to complete the square so that the equation now will look completely different. And it'll, on the left-hand side, it'll be x plus 3 squared is equal to 8. Now that's step 1. To move to step 2, I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now step 3, I will just subtract 3 to both sides to create my solutions. So just very quickly, I'm going to solve these two questions, just as a simple review. So I'm going to solve x plus 3 squared is equal to 4. What I can do is I can take the square root of both sides. And when I take the square root of both sides, maybe I'll explicitly show you me taking the square root of both sides. I need to consider both positive and negative roots. That's going to be very important. On the left-hand side, I have the factor of x plus 3. And on the right-hand side, I have plus or minus 2. So the equation I'm just going to label my steps. Step 0, step 1, step 2. So the equation that is expressed in 0, open brackets, x plus 3 squared is equal to 4, can be written as 1. And when we take the square root of it, this is step 2. Now, if I just simply subtract 3 to both sides, the constant to both sides, I am able to get my solutions that x is equal to negative 3 plus or minus 2. Now remember that this really is two different solutions. So I'm just going to call one x1 and the other one x2. x1 is going to be negative 3 subtract 2. x2 is negative 3 plus 2. That's where that plus and minus comes in. So my first solution for x1 is going to be negative 5. My solution for x2 is going to be negative 1. So I would write my complete solution set as x is equal to negative 5, comma, negative 1. So those are the values of x that make my original statement true. Now, a lot of people are scared of fractions, and I really don't know why. They're just numbers. So allow me to take a look at this question. I know it's a review from previous class, but bear with me. I have a binomial factor that is squared on the left-hand side and a constant on the right-hand side. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So, and when I take the square root of the left-hand side, I'm just going to simply write it as x minus 1/2. Of the right-hand side, I need to consider both positive and negative roots. There we have it. Now, often is the case, I'm just going to call this step 1. So step 1, I could write square root both sides. Step 2, I would probably simply change the way that I would consider plus or minus the square root of 9 over 4. When we take the square root of a fraction, you can take the square root of the top and the bottom. And this works out kind of well now. I would add 1/2 to both sides, and I have the expression, so I'm just going to add 1/2 to both sides. And I have the expression that x is equal to -1/2 plus or minus 3 over 2. And this creates two solutions. My x1 is 1/2 minus 3 over 2. And the second solution, x2, is going to be 1/2 plus 3 over 2. And what we're able to see is that this x1, well, 1/2 minus 3 over 2 would actually be -2 over 2, or -1. x2 is 1/2 plus 3 over 2. So if you add 1/2 and 3/2, that's 4/2, which is better known as 2. So I would write my solutions as x is going to be equal to -1 and 2. Now, when we're solving a quadratic equation by completing the square, we complete a perfect square factor on one side of the equation, which I guess this side of the equation is a perfect square, and the other side is a constant. Since there is a perfect square, we can square root both sides. Now, this is the most often forgotten fact that people forget to do. When we apply a square root, we must consider both positive and negative roots. Completing the square is a process of producing a perfect square trinomial that will be in the form of x minus h squared. More on that later.